Have you ever felt like something was off but couldn't quite put your finger on it? You're going through the motions of daily life, but there's this subtle heaviness that follows you around. You tell yourself it's just stress, or that everyone feels this way sometimes. But what if I told you that what you're experiencing might actually be depression, hiding in plain sight? Depression doesn't always announce itself with obvious signs. It doesn't always look like someone crying in bed or unable to get up in the morning. Sometimes it whispers. It disguises itself as normal behavior, as personality quirks, or as just having a bad week. And that's exactly what makes it so dangerous. Today we're going to talk about 7 silent symptoms of depression that you might not even realize you have. These are the subtle signs that fly under the radar, the ones that people dismiss or normalize, even though they're crying out for attention. If you've been feeling like something isn't quite right, this might be the explanation you've been looking for. Symptom 1. You're always tired no matter how much you sleep. Let's start with something that almost everyone can relate to. Exhaustion. But I'm not talking about being tired after a long day at work or after exercising. I'm talking about that bone-deep fatigue that never seems to go away, no matter how much sleep you get. You wake up tired. You go through your day tired. You collapse into bed exhausted, sleep for 8, 9, even 10 hours, and wake up the next morning feeling like you never slept at all. People around you might joke that you're lazy or that you just love sleeping, but inside, you know something else is going on. This is called depression fatigue, and it's fundamentally different from normal tiredness. When you're dealing with depression, your brain is working overtime trying to manage difficult emotions, negative thoughts, and chemical imbalances. It's like running multiple heavy programs on your computer at once. Everything slows down, and the battery drains faster than usual. The tricky part is that this fatigue becomes so normal that you stop questioning it. You start planning your life around it. You decline social invitations because you're too tired. You put off tasks and goals because you don't have the energy. And slowly, without realizing it, this exhaustion begins to shrink your world. If you find yourself constantly exhausted despite adequate rest, and if simple tasks feel like climbing a mountain, this might be more than just needing a vacation. Your body might be telling you that something deeper needs attention. Symptom 2. You've lost interest in things that used to excite you. Think about the things you used to love. Maybe it was reading, painting, playing music, watching your favorite sports team, or spending time on a particular hobby. Now, be honest with yourself. When was the last time you felt genuinely excited about these things? One of the most insidious symptoms of depression is something called anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure or interest in activities you once enjoyed. It doesn't happen overnight. It's gradual. You start noticing that your favorite TV show doesn't capture your attention like it used to. That hobby you were passionate about starts feeling like a chore. Going out with friends becomes something you do out of obligation rather than excitement. What makes this symptom so silent is that it's easy to rationalize. You tell yourself you're just growing up, or that your tastes are changing, or that you're too busy for hobbies right now. But deep down, there's a flatness to life that wasn't there before. Everything feels a bit gray, a bit muted, like someone turned down the saturation on your entire existence. This loss of interest extends beyond hobbies too. It can affect your relationships, your career, even basic self-care activities. Things that used to matter suddenly don't. Goals you were working toward feel pointless, and perhaps most concerning, you stop caring that you don't care. The danger here is that when you lose interest in the things that brought you joy, you also lose the coping mechanisms that helped you manage stress and maintain mental health. It becomes a vicious cycle. Depression takes away your interest in activities, which means you have fewer ways to combat the depression, which deepens the lack of interest. Symptom 3. You're irritable and short-tempered. Here's a symptom that surprises most people: constant irritability. When we think of depression, we usually picture sadness, not anger. But depression doesn't always look like crying or withdrawal. Sometimes it looks like snapping at your partner over small things, getting disproportionately angry when someone asks you a simple question, or feeling constantly annoyed by people around you. This irritability isn't about having a bad day or being justifiably frustrated. It's a persistent, simmering anger that sits just beneath the surface, ready to boil over at the smallest provocation. Someone chews too loudly, and suddenly you're furious. Your coworker asks about your weekend and you feel an inexplicable surge of annoyance. A friend texts you, and instead of being happy to hear from them, you're irritated that they're demanding your attention. This symptom is particularly silent because it's so often mislabeled. People might think you're just stressed, or that you've become a more difficult person, or that you're going through a phase. You might even start believing that the problem is everyone else, that people are more annoying than they used to be, that the world is more frustrating than it should be. But here's what's really happening. Depression is exhausting, and when you're depleted, your tolerance for anything extra goes way down. Your emotional resources are already spent just trying to get through the day, so you have nothing left for patience, understanding, or flexibility. Every small inconvenience feels like the last straw. What makes this particularly damaging is that irritability can push away the very people who might otherwise support you. Your relationships suffer, which increases feelings of isolation and loneliness, which feeds back into the depression. And because you don't recognize the irritability as a symptom of something larger, you don't know how to stop the cycle. Symptom 4. You're having trouble concentrating and making decisions. Have you noticed that your brain just doesn't work the way it used to? You sit down to read an article and have to go over the same paragraph 3 times. Someone tells you something important, and 5 minutes later you can't remember what they said. You need to make a simple decision: what to eat for dinner, which shirt to wear, and suddenly you're paralyzed with indecision. This cognitive fog is one of depression's most frustrating symptoms, partly because it affects your ability to function in daily life, and partly because it's so hard to explain to others. How do you tell your boss that you can't focus on the report because your brain feels like it's wading through mud? How do you explain to your partner that you genuinely can't decide between 2 options because every choice feels overwhelmingly difficult? Depression affects the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for executive functions like concentration, decision-making, and working memory. When you're depressed, this area doesn't function as efficiently. It's not that you're not trying hard enough or that you need to focus better. Your brain chemistry is literally making it harder for you to concentrate and process information. The silent nature of this symptom comes from the fact that we live in a world full of distractions. It's easy to blame your inability to focus on your phone, social media, or just being bad at multitasking. You might even start believing you're just not as smart as you used to be, that you're losing your edge, or that you're becoming incompetent. But here's the truth. If you're finding it increasingly difficult to concentrate, if making even simple decisions feels exhausting, and if your memory isn't what it used to be, you're not losing your mind. Your brain is trying to manage depression, and cognitive function is one of the casualties. Symptom 5. You're experiencing physical aches and pains with no clear cause. Now let's talk about something that might really surprise you: unexplained physical pain. Depression isn't just a mental health condition. It manifests physically in very real ways. You might be experiencing headaches that won't go away, persistent back pain, stomach issues, chest tightness, or a general sense of physical discomfort that doctors can't quite explain. Here's what's fascinating and often overlooked. Your brain and body are not separate entities. They're constantly communicating through a complex network of neurotransmitters, hormones, and nerve signals. When depression disrupts this communication system, your body responds with physical symptoms. These aren't imaginary pains or all in your head in the dismissive sense. They're real physical sensations caused by real biological processes. Depression can lower your pain threshold, increase inflammation in your body, tense your muscles chronically, and disrupt your digestive system. It can cause your body to exist in a constant state of low-level stress, which manifests as physical discomfort. The silent part of this symptom is that most people visit their doctor for these physical complaints without ever mentioning their mental state. They go through test after test, trying to find a physical cause for physical symptoms, never making the connection to their emotional well-being. Meanwhile, doctors who only look at the physical symptoms might miss the underlying depression entirely. You might have been told that your test results are normal, that there's nothing physically wrong with you, or that it's just stress. And while that can be frustrating, it might also be a clue. If you're experiencing persistent physical symptoms that have no clear medical explanation, and especially if these symptoms came on gradually around the same time, other aspects of your life started feeling harder, depression might be the missing puzzle piece. Symptom 6. You're isolating yourself without realizing it. Let's talk about a symptom that happens so gradually, you don't notice it until you look back and realize how much your social world has shrunk. You start canceling plans more often. You stop initiating contact with friends. When people reach out, you respond less frequently or take longer to reply. You tell yourself you're just busy, or that you need alone time, or that you'll reconnect when you're feeling more up to it. But weeks turn into months, and you're still finding reasons not to engage. Social invitations start to feel like obligations rather than opportunities. The thought of going out and being on around other people feels exhausting. It's just easier to stay home, to keep to yourself, to avoid the effort that social interaction requires. What makes this symptom particularly insidious is that isolation both causes and is caused by depression. It's another vicious cycle. Depression makes you want to withdraw, and withdrawing makes the depression worse by removing social support and positive interactions from your life. But because the withdrawal happens gradually, and because we live in a culture that often glorifies introversion and self-care, it's easy to miss that something problematic is happening. You might even convince yourself that you're just becoming more comfortable with your own company, that you're maturing beyond needing constant social interaction, or that other people are too draining to be worth the effort. But there's a difference between healthy alone time and isolation driven by depression. The former is restorative and chosen. The latter is avoiding connection because connecting feels impossible. Here's the test. Do you feel better after spending time alone, or do you feel more empty? When friends reach out, is your first feeling happiness or dread? When you imagine going out and doing something social, does any part of you feel excited, or does it all just feel like too much? If you're isolating yourself and it's not making you feel better, it's not self-care. It's a symptom. Symptom 7. You're functioning, but you're not really living. This last symptom might be the most subtle and most profound of all. On paper, your life looks fine. You're going to work, paying your bills, maintaining your responsibilities. To everyone on the outside, you appear to be functioning normally. But inside, you know the truth. You're not really living. You're just going through the motions, checking boxes, surviving rather than thriving. This is what's often called high-functioning depression, and it's incredibly common yet rarely discussed. You've become an expert at putting on a mask. You smile when you're supposed to smile. You engage in small talk. You meet your obligations. But there's a disconnect between the person everyone sees and the emptiness you feel inside. The days blur together in a monotonous routine. You can't remember the last time you felt genuinely happy or excited about something. Life feels like a series of tasks to complete rather than experiences to enjoy. You're present but not engaged, existing but not living. And the scariest part? You've been doing this for so long that you've almost forgotten there's another way to feel. What makes this symptom so silent is that it's perfectly camouflaged. Society rewards functioning, showing up, being productive, maintaining appearances. Nobody asks if you're actually happy or fulfilled as long as you're getting things done. And you might not even realize how disconnected you've become from your own life until something forces you to confront it. This feeling of going through the motions is often accompanied by a sense of numbness. Not sadness exactly, but an absence of feeling. Life feels flat, two-dimensional. You're watching your own life happen rather than actively participating in it. And day after day, you tell yourself that this is just what adult life is like, that everyone feels this way, that you just need to keep pushing through. But here's what you need to understand. This is not what life has to be. The fact that you can function doesn't mean you're okay. The ability to maintain appearances doesn't negate the emptiness you feel inside. High-functioning depression is still depression, and it deserves attention, compassion, and treatment just as much as the more obvious presentations. If you recognized yourself in any of these symptoms, or especially if you recognized yourself in several of them, I want you to know a few important things. First, you're not alone. Millions of people are walking around with silent depression, thinking they're the only ones feeling this way, believing they should just be able to push through it. But depression is not a personal failing or a weakness. It's a medical condition that affects your brain chemistry and requires proper attention. Second, recognizing these symptoms is not about self-diagnosis or self-pity. It's about self-awareness and self-compassion. Understanding what you're experiencing is the first step toward doing something about it. Knowledge is power, and now you have language for feelings that might have been confusing or frightening. Third, and most importantly, there is help available and things can get better. Whether it's therapy, medication, lifestyle changes, or a combination of approaches, depression is treatable. The weight you're carrying doesn't have to be carried alone, and the flatness you're experiencing isn't permanent. I encourage you to reach out to someone. Talk to a trusted friend or family member about what you're experiencing. Make an appointment with a mental health professional. Call a helpline if you need immediate support. The hardest part is often taking that first step, but every journey toward healing has to start somewhere. Depression is a liar. It tells you that this is just who you are now, that nothing will help, that you should just accept feeling this way. But the truth is that beneath the depression, you're still there. The person who used to feel joy, who had energy and interests and connections, that person hasn't disappeared. They're just buried under symptoms that can be addressed and treated. Your life doesn't have to be an endless gray routine. You don't have to spend your days just surviving. You deserve more than just functioning. You deserve to actually live, to feel, to connect, to thrive. And recognizing these silent symptoms? That's the first step toward reclaiming the life that depression has been quietly stealing from you. Take care of yourself. Be kind to yourself. And remember, asking for help isn't giving up. It's fighting back.